Hello and welcome to this video tutorial, brought to you by tastytudes.com. In this tutorial, I'm going to demonstrate how you can create an effect similar to the Game of Thrones artwork style in Adobe Photoshop. If you're not familiar with this style, you can see some examples, links are in the description. Now, normally, I would just quickly demonstrate the tools I use in order to create the artwork. But in this video, I'm going to discuss more in depth my process and why I use each technique. There are many ways you can achieve an effect in Photoshop. In this video, I will be demonstrating some techniques that work for me. Now, these techniques I use quite frequently, which are not necessarily unique to this project. So the point of going into depth is so that you can learn and apply these techniques in other projects. So here are a set of examples I have prepared earlier. If you wish to take a look at these examples, you can find the downloadable PSD links in the description, where you can take a closer look at the layer structures. For this tutorial, I'm going to be creating this example here. I'm going to start with this image here on the left and end up with this image on the right. As you can see, I have included some additional photo manipulation elements, such as the chainmail and the scars on the face. Now, I have chosen to include these elements so as to showcase some extra techniques that you may find interesting and useful. Though, if you're not interested in this part and wish to skip right ahead to learn how to apply the blue color effect, you can do so by skipping forward on the timeline. I have broken this video into sections, and you can see in the description the times in which to skip ahead to. If you wish to follow along with this tutorial, you can download the project folder. Link is in the description. So with all that said, let's get into it. So to begin with, I'm going to need a suitable subject to start with. And as always, the higher the quality of the image you're starting with, the better your end result will be. If I press and hold Command and Alt on the keyboard and press I can pull up my image properties. And I can see this image is 1155 pixels by 1732 pixels. The resolution is 150 dpi, and the picture is looking pretty sharp, so already I'm off to a good start. Now, in my experience, I find one of the biggest factors in photo manipulation is foresight and the ability to plan ahead, and organization. It helps to know what you want to create, know what you need to do in order to get the effect you want, and organize your layer structure by naming and grouping layers into folders, for example. Before I start, I often stop and think about things I can do in order to best prepare for the task ahead and make the project workflow more easier. So I always try and start from the basics and work up, though often I find that later on there is a degree of experimentation, which of course I have to manage along the way. So now my image is open, the first thing I want to do is separate the figure from the background. I know that later on in the development of my artwork, I'm going to have this figure set on a solid black background, so it seems logical to start with this. Now, there are a few techniques you can use here, but on this occasion, I'm going to demonstrate a simple one. And this technique is going to work really well in this instance, as my image is quite simple. So first, I'm going to unlock my layer here. I can actually see there is a lock icon on the layer. So I'm going to double click on the layer. It's going to ask me to give this layer a name, and I'm going to type in main figure and click OK. Now, I'm going to apply a layer mask to this layer. I can do this simply by coming to the bottom of the layers panel and clicking on the add layer mask icon third from the left. Now I can see my layer thumbnail on the layer is in white. So I'm going to zoom in a little. With this mask layer thumbnail now currently selected, I'm going to choose the brush tool by pressing B on the keyboard. Make sure my foreground color is set to black. I'm going to select a solid brush. Make sure my opacity is set to 100% in the control panel here on the top. I'm going to click on the brush panel and make sure my spacing is set to 0. I'm going to toggle my brush size accordingly, and I'm going to start by clicking down on the bottom left corner just above his shoulder. I'm going to press and hold Shift on the keyboard, and I'm going to click once. Move along and click once again. This will draw a straight line, and you will see I am beginning to mask away the background. So I'm going to continue around the outside of the head, pressing and holding spacebar to click and drag around my canvas area, and I'm going to continue around my head until I come over to the other side. Now I'm going to zoom out, toggle my brush size, and mask away the rest of the background until I have successfully masked away all the background like so. And if I zoom in and toggle the brush size, I can mask away some of the details here too. Once I have cut out the figure, I will create a new layer. I can do this by pressing and holding Command-Shift on the keyboard and press N. I will call this black background. Then I will select the paint bucket, and with a black color, I will click to fill the layer. Once filled, I will then click and drag this background layer to the bottom of my layers panel like so. Okay, so now I have my figure cut out and set on a black background. I'm ready to move on to the next step. Next, I'm going to start to bring in some image accessories to turn this man into a medieval warrior. So I'm going to start by adding some battle scars to his face. So I'm going to come over to the image pack, which is available in the downloadable project folder. Now, this is a file I have prepared earlier. I have done some research online and cut out some images I would like to use. Now, I do this quite often. I find that the best effects are real effects, so the more I can use actual photo reference material, the more realistic my outcome. And thankfully, we live in an age where images are readily available on the internet. So with a little time spent researching, we can actually create something interesting from bits and pieces found on the internet without actually taking a photo. So as you can see, I have some chainmail that I have cut out previously and some scar samples. So I'm going to select one of the scars here. As you can see, there are a lot of layers and images here. So a quick way I can do this is move my mouse cursor over the example I want and right click. Up will pop the reference menu, and if I select the one I want and click and drag, I can identify I have the example I want. I'm then going to drag this into the tab of my current document, place the mouse cursor into the canvas area and release click, and the scar should now appear as a new layer in my document. Excellent! So now I want to position the scar somewhere on the face and alter the color properties to look more convincing. So I'm going to position this scar around the left eye. Currently the scar is looking too big. So to begin, I'm going to change the size of the image sample. I can do this by pressing Command T on the keyboard to activate free transform. I'm going to drag this scar into position. Press and hold Shift and Alt on the keyboard and click and drag the top right pointer in to scale down the image until I am happy. And I might just click and drag on the middle left pointer to bring this in as well. Okay, so the scar is in place, but it's not looking right. It's too pink and the skin around it is not the same as the man's face. So it's not really that convincing right now. So now I'm going to modify this image scar sample to try and blend it in with the skin on the man behind. So I'm going to come to my layer in the layers panel and add an adjustment layer. I can do this by first making sure I have the layer selected, and at the bottom of my layers panel, I'm going to click on the add adjustment layer icon, the one in the middle. From the selection, I'm going to choose curves, and up will pop the adjustment layer panel. So what I'm about to do is toggle the properties of the curves to really enhance the scar. Right now it's looking flat, and I want to try and create more contrast and make the scar more prominent. So I'm going to move my mouse cursor into the curves panel and click to drop an anchor point into the middle like so. Then I'm going to come over to the right slightly, and towards the top I'm going to click to drop another anchor, but this time I'm going to pull this anchor up. Now as I do this, you will see the entire image change. I need to come to the bottom of the adjustment layer panel and click on the clip adjustment layer button. By pressing this, I will only apply this adjustment layer to the layer immediately below. And then you will also see an arrow pointing down on the layer in the Layers panel. Okay, next in the Curves properties, I'm going to come over to the left and towards the bottom and drop another pointer on the curve, but this time drag it down slightly. Now I'm going to reevaluate my middle pointer. I'm going to click and drag this up, and you can see it becomes more lighter. Though I want this scar to be more prominent, so I'm going to drag this down slightly. So now it has more contrast, but it is still not blending with the face. So next I'm going to add another adjustment layer, but this time I'm going to select Hue Saturation. Remember again to click on the clipping icon on the bottom of the adjustment layer panel, and I'm going to select the saturation pointer and drag this left to desaturate slightly, and that's looking a little more closer to the image behind. Now, depending on the skin tone of your subject, you might also want to toggle the hue as well. I'm just going to move this slightly to the right, and that's looking pretty cool. But I can see this scar sample is still clashing with the skin behind. Now I'm going to blend the scar sample with the skin behind. To do this, I'm going to apply a layer mask to the scar layer. So with the layer selected in the Layers panel, I'm going to come to the bottom of the Layers panel and click the Add Layer Mask icon, third from the left. Upon click, I will now see a white thumbnail appear on my layer. This is my mask thumbnail, and I'm about to edit this. Next, I'm going to make sure this white thumbnail is selected. I'm going to choose a black foreground color, make sure I have a feathered brush selected, and up here in the control panel, I'm going to set my opacity to 50%. Then I'm going to come over to my scar sample, toggle my brush size, and begin to mask away parts of the scar sample and begin to blend the scar into the skin behind. Remember I set the opacity to 50%? Well, this will make it easier to blend the skin layer in. So soon I will end up with something that looks like this. And now that's looking pretty convincing. Now if I take a look on the Layers panel, I can now see I have this one layer and the adjustment layers above. Now later on I am going to be building a lot of layers for this artwork, so for the sake of organization I'm now going to group these layers into a folder. To do this, I'm going to first select the top layer in the Layers panel, press and hold Shift and select the scar image layer. This will select them all, and then I'm going to press Command G to group these layers into a folder. Then I'm going to double click onto the name and rename this group to Scar 1. And that is my first scar on the face. So next I'm going to come back into the image pack, select another scar example, drag this into the comp, and by using the same technique I now have scar number 2. Now on this occasion I want to merge this even more with the face below. So I'm going to come to the Layers panel, click on the folder and add a blending mode of Multiply by clicking the top left option on the Layers panel and selecting from the options. Now, if this suddenly looks too dark or discolored, I can simply come back into my Hue Saturation and Curves adjustment layer properties and toggle these until I am happy. Next, I'm going to come back into the image pack, select another scar example, drag this into my comp, and by using the same techniques, I now have scar number 3. Now, I want to put some scars on the bridge of the nose. I like this scar on the forehead, and I want to duplicate this and place it on the nose. So in my Layers panel, I'm going to click on scar 3, the folder, and with my Move tool on the canvas, I'm going to press and hold Alt on the keyboard and click and drag to quickly duplicate this scar down. Now you will see in the Layers panel, I have copied the folder and all the adjustment layers. So by pressing Command T, I'm going to alter the size of this scar and reposition into place. So I'm going to zoom in. Now looking at this scar sample, If that is looking a little dark, I can come into my hue saturation and curves adjustment layers and toggle these until I have a result I'm happy with. Again, I'm going to duplicate this scar above, resize and position until I have something that looks like this. So now I have some convincing scars on the face. I'm going to finish this off by selecting the top scar layer in the Layers panel, press and hold Shift on the keyboard, select the bottom scar folder and press Command G to group these into one folder and name this folder Scars. So this was before and this was after. Excellent. So next I'm going to bring in the chainmail. So back into my image pack, I'm going to select the chainmail and drag it into my document like so. And this is looking too big for my subject, so by pressing Command T on the keyboard, I will scale the sample down until I feel it adequately fits. Now in this instance, I can see the ears of the subject behind are poking out. So I'm going to come back to the mask thumbnail on the main figure layer and edit this by selecting a black foreground color and with the brush tool mask away the ears until I have something that looks like this. So that's pretty cool. Now I want to create a subtle shadow under the chainmail, so I'm going to select the folder below the chainmail layer and press and hold Shift Command on the keyboard and press N. This is going to create a new layer. I'm going to call this layer Shadows. So I'm going to select the brush tool and set the opacity to 40% up in the control panel. I'm going to select a black foreground color and toggle my brush size and just start to click around the breast area and then around the top of the head. Next, I want to create a subtle shadow under the chainmail itself. So on the Layers panel, I'm going to double click on the chainmail layer and up will pop the layer styles. So on the left, I'm going to select Outer Glow, and here on the right, I'm going to start to toggle some of the properties. I'm going to begin by changing the blending mode to normal. I'm going to change the color to black, change the opacity to 80%. I'm going to give the glow a slight noise of 10. I'm going to change the spread to 3, change the size to 8, and I'm going to toggle the range. In this case, I'll change the range to about 56. Now, you may not use these exact settings yourself. You may want to play around with this until you get an outcome you are happy with. So that completes the first stage of the artwork, adding the image accessories. Now, if you're watching this video and you do not wish to add any of these image accessories to your composition, then you can apply the following techniques to your single photographic layer. Though remember, you will have to cut out your figure first, as demonstrated earlier in the video. So the quality of my image is quite good. It already has a degree of contrast and sharpness, but I just want to boost this slightly and add more richness to the overall composition. I can do this by selecting the top layer in the Layers panel, coming to the bottom of the Layers panel and clicking the Add Adjustment Layer icon, and I'm going to select Curves. Just like earlier, I'm going to tweak my curves, click to add 1 point in the middle, 1 point on the top right, and 1 point in the bottom left. But this time I'm only going to drag my bottom left pointer down, just to add to the richness I want, like so. Also, notice this time I am not going to click on the clip icon, as I want this adjustment layer to apply to every layer below in the Layers panel. So once I'm happy, I'm going to finish this preparation stage by selecting the top layer on the Layers panel, press and hold Shift, select the bottom layer and press Command G to group the layers together and rename this group to Main Composition. Then I'm going to crop my image. I'm going to do this by pressing C on the keyboard and click and drag an area I wish to crop. Once I'm happy, I will press Enter on the keyboard. Okay, so that completes the main composition and the preparation of my main figure image. Now I am ready to proceed into the final stage of the artwork and apply the blue tint effect. So now I want the right side of the face to be completely blue. If I take a look at the finished comp, you can see the effect I want to achieve. So back in my main comp, I'm going to start by creating a new layer. I can do this by pressing and holding Command-Shift on the keyboard and pressing N. I'm going to call this layer Blue Tint Base. Then I'm going to fill this layer with a blue color. First, I'm going to click on the foreground color and enter in the value 007 AAA. Then, with the paint bucket tool, I'm going to fill the layer like so. As soon as the layer is filled, I'm going to add a blending mode to this layer. I can do this by selecting the blending mode in the top left, and I'm going to apply a multiply blending mode to this layer. And now the blue has blended nicely to the face. Next, I'm going to create another blue layer, but for this, I'm going to demonstrate another technique, so check this one out. So I'm going to come to the top menu, select Image, scroll down and select Duplicate, and click OK. Now this is going to create an entirely new document and contain all the layers. Next, in this new document, I'm going to toggle the visibility of this new blue layer so I am back to the colored portrait. Then click the menu button in the top right of the Layers panel, scroll down and select Flatten Image and click OK. So now I have flattened the entire comp and I am left with one single layer in the Layers panel. Next, I'm going to come up to Image Mode and change this to Grayscale. Then I'm going to come back to Image Mode and this time change the setting to Duotone. Then all of a sudden, up will pop the Duotone options and a color will be applied. Now, by default, you might find your option may be set to monotone. If this is the case, simply click on the type option and select Duotone. So now I have two ink samples I can choose. What I'm going to do here is select two blue tones to create a nice rich blue duotone image. So the first sample I'm going to go with is a light blue color. For this, I'm going to enter in the value 47BBF1 and click OK. Next, I'm going to choose a darker sample. I'm going to enter in the values 0465AF. I need to make sure both samples are named, so I'll name the top sample Blue 1 and the second Blue 2 and click OK. So now I have my image in duotone. Perfect. So now I'm going to take this into my main comp. I'm going to press Command A to select all, Command C to copy, and Command W to close the document as I no longer need it. And I'm not going to save this. Back in my main comp, I'm going to press Command V to paste, and I'll rename this layer to Blue Tint Multiply. So now I want to blend this blue tint to my image below. To do this, I'm going to apply a blending mode. With my layer still selected, I'm going to come to the blending mode options and give this layer a blending mode of multiply. Next, I'm going to press Command J to duplicate this layer. And for this layer, I am going to change the blending mode to overlay. So now I have built up a nice blue tint effect. Next, I'm going to rename the top blue tint layer to Blue Tint Overlay. So now they are all easily identifiable. So now I want to reveal my coloured face back into the artwork. What I'm going to do next is apply a layer mask to the three blue tint layers. I can do this simply by selecting the layer and clicking the Add Layer Mask icon at the bottom of the Layers panel. Now I can see the white layer mask thumbnails on each blue tint layer. Though before I do anything else, I'm going to select each white thumbnail and press Command I. Now this is going to invert the masks, so now I can see the mask thumbnails have turned black, and I can no longer see the blue tints. What I'm going to do next is select the brush tool, choose a feathered brush, choose a white foreground colour, and change the opacity to 50% in the control panel, toggle the brush size and start to edit the blue tint base mask and reveal the blue tint back onto the face. I am carefully going to paint the blue tint onto the face like so, and soon I will end up with something that looks like this. Next, I'm going to click onto the mask thumbnail of the blue tint multiply layer, and like earlier, just edit the mask to reveal the blue multiply tint. And this will add more richness to the blue tint. Next, I'm going to click onto the mask thumbnail of the blue tint overlay and just edit the mask to reveal some highlights around the face, perhaps changing the opacity down to 20% and clicking down the middle to spread the effect like so, and around the face just to give some highlights. And that's looking pretty cool. Now I have some flexibility here. If I'm not entirely happy with any of these blue tones, I can change them. For example, if I click on the blue tint multiply layer and add a hue saturation adjustment layer, I can push up the saturation, and that's going to enhance my effect further. Though remember to click on the clip button on the bottom of the adjustments layer. And if I think any of the layers are too intense, I can toggle the opacity of the layer to control the effect further. Nice. So once I'm happy, I'm going to select all my blue tint layers and group these into one folder and name this folder Blue Tints. With this single layer folder, I can now apply another layer mask which will apply to all the layers contained, even layers with existing layer masks. So using a black brush set to 30% in the control panel, I'm going to mask away some of the blue tint from the white of the eye here, just to make it pop a little. Now, if you look carefully at the Game of Thrones artwork, some links are in the description, you will notice the skin tone on the coloured areas are more pinky yellow. Now, I have not covered how to achieve that skin tone effect in this video, but one way you can get a closer effect to this is by navigating back to your main composition folder, and I'm going to click on the main figure layer and press Command J to duplicate this layer. Now, I'm duplicating the layer as I'm about to make some changes that I won't be able to undo or change later on, so I'm going to keep my original layer and edit this new copy above. So with the new layer selected, I'm going to come to Image, Adjustments and select Selective Color. And up will pop the Selective Color panel. Now this is going to give me the flexibility to isolate each color range and adjust the values. So starting with red, I'm going to pull the black over to the left to around -50, and I can see that that is lightening the reds. Then I'm going to click on the color option and select the next one down, being yellow, and again I'm going to pull the black down to -50 and also the yellow to -50. Finally, I'm going to select the whites and push the yellow up to +50. So if I toggle the visibility of this layer, I can see before and after. Before and after. Now it's looking a little more lighter and closer to the Game of Thrones artwork style. If you try this, you may have to discover different values depending on the colour of your original image. Now, the Game of Thrones artwork is also very sharp and gritty, so to create a more sharper and grittier effect, I'm going to press and hold Shift, select the Blue Tints folder and my main comp folder, right-click and duplicate layers. With these new layer folders selected in the Layers panel, I'm going to press Command E, and this is going to merge these layers into a single layer. With this new layer selected, I'm going to come to Filter, scroll down to Sharpen and select Sharpen. Notice how the image becomes a little more grittier. Well, again, I'm going to come to Filter, but this time select Sharpen from the top and apply the Sharpen filter again. And I can see this is now a lot more sharper and grittier. Though, if I think that this is too intense, I can alter the opacity of this layer. In this instance, I'm going to change the opacity of this layer to 50%. So that completes the blue tint effect. Now I'm going to proceed with the finishing touches. So next I'm going to press and hold Command and Shift and press N to create a new layer. I'm going to name this layer Shadow. Now I'm going to create the shadow around the face to blend the portrait into the background. So with the brush tool active, I will choose a feathered brush, choose a black foreground color, change the opacity to 30% in the control panel, toggle my brush size accordingly, and begin to click around my face area like so to create a nice shadow effect. And soon I will have something that looks like this. Also on the Game of Thrones artwork, the eyes seem to pop out and stand out a lot. So I'm going to navigate back to my main comp folder and come to the original figure layer. I'm going to select the elliptical marquee tool and click to create a selection around the left eye, like so. Then I'm going to press and hold Shift on the keyboard and click to make another selection, this time of the right eye. Now I'm going to press Command C to copy and Command V to paste. So I'm going to rename this layer to Eyes and click and drag my new layer up to the top like so. With this layer selected, I'm going to apply a layer blending mode of screen. Then I'm going to press Command L and this is going to pull up my levels panel. And I'm going to pull the far right pointer in and my far right pointer in as well, and toggle the middle pointer until my eyes really pop. Next, I'm going to press E to pull up my eraser tool, and I'm going to just delete the top parts of the eyes I don't want. Now, in this instance, the man has brown eyes, and I need to change my right eye to blue to coincide with the blue tint effect. So with the marquee tool selected, I will make a selection over the right eye and I'm going to press Command U to pull up my hue saturation panel. And I will simply toggle the hue to make the eye blue until it fits with the blue tint, perhaps changing the saturation if necessary. And that completes the entire portrait composition. Lastly, I'm going to bring in the Game of Thrones title and resize, and that completes the Game of Thrones artwork in Adobe Photoshop. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video tutorial. If you liked the tutorial, hit the like button on my Facebook page. Don't forget, you can download the documents you saw in this tutorial. All links are in the description. If you do have a go at this yourself, be sure to come and paste it up on my Facebook wall. I'd love to see what you guys can come up with, so looking forward to that. Well, that's it for another video, brought to you by tastytudes.com. Thanks for watching, have fun guys, and I'll see you next time.